Hey, welcome to Shabbos Stories with the Raice brothers.
Oh yeah.
So we just want to do like maybe one or two stories today. I'll just read them out and then we'll jam on them and see like what comes up and what we think about them and see where it goes. Okay, so the first story I found this week, Parshas Acharei Mos. One time, our holy Zaidi, the Apter of, was on the road again, and he came to a village to visit some Yidden over there, and they prepared two places for him to stay and gave him the choice of picking. Now, both of them were wealthy fellows. They had nice houses, and they had plenty of room for the Rebbe, for the Apter of. One of them didn't have such a great reputation. People said things about him that maybe he did things wrong. Maybe, rumors spread about him. And he himself, he knew that there were rumors spread about him. And he was a very humble guy. He knew the way people spoke about him, and he knew the way people looked at him. And because of that, he was very humble. And he was a very pleasant guy, very, very pleasant. He was very easygoing, easy to get along with. He had a very, very good nature. The second fellow was very far from Averis. He didn't do any Averis whatsoever. Sterling reputation. He was what people call a fine Yid. A fine Yid. But he was very, very proud of this. So the Apter of chose to stay by the humble Yid's house. And his Hasidim said to him, Rebbe, why would you stay by that guy? You didn't hear what people say about him? Like, he's not exactly the best Jew in the world. So the Apter of said, well, this fellow who maybe doesn't do any Averis, and but he's a big Baal Gaiva. He's very proud of himself. And Hashem says that I can't be in the same place as a Baal Gaiva. And if Hashem doesn't want to stay with him, I don't want to stay with him either. But the other fellow, maybe he did Averis, but Hashem says, in this week's parsha, Hashem dwells with us even in our Tumah. So if Hashem could stay with him, I could stay with him.
Sometimes humility makes space. Humility means I'm not perfect. And that's the difference. I think Reb Shlomo actually says the difference between Tumah and Tara is that Tameh is when you're cut off, and Tara is when you're open. Tumah is like you're filled up with all the filth. So even it's interesting that the Hasheichen itam b'seich tumasam, but to be able to be like with Hashem, and that Hashem's like when you feel like you're mamish like the tzaddik of everything and you got everything right, then you might feel like, oh, that's it. I hit the level. I think that's what Rabbi Nachman teaches. Emesek Shemayim Shamata. You have to know. Maybe I'm messing up. Maybe I'm even messing up the fact that I'm so high and holy. Maybe I'm making like a pirud in Hashem Echad U'Shmai Echad. Because Gevalt Hashem's everywhere. But when you're open to the fact that I don't have it all, there's space. There's a lot of space.
Right, and all that. I mean, it's a couple of things. I feel like sometimes when we do Averas, it's like Hashem kind of knocks us down into an Avera just so we remember you're not all that. It's like we could get so involved in, like, if we're in a good place. I know me sometimes, like when I'm in a good place, it's like, oh, I'm so good, I'm doing so great. It's like, no. You're only doing so great by the grace of God. Like David HaMelech said, we say in Mizmor Shir Chanukah Sabayis David, what's the pasuk over there? He says, oh man.
Histarta panecha yisinivhol.
Right, how does that pasuk start? Oh man, I'm just slipping my mind. Hashem he'elisa min sha'ol nafshi chiyisani miradiv. Hashem, you took me, you lifted me out.
That's the pasuk after.
V'ani amarti v'shalvi. That's before, right. And then he says, "V'ani amarti v'shalvi I said when I was in a place of shalva and I was in a place of good, everything was going well. Bal emet la'ilam. I'll never stumble again. I'm so great. I'm getting up every day. I'm davening. I'm learning. I'm calm. Nothing can knock me down. Right? And but Hashem, only by your grace and by your favor, you made my mountain strong. You made me into a big mountain. But if you hide your face from me for a second, boom, I'm totally out of whack. I'm totally messed up.
Yeah, when Mama's gonna eat it. It's one of the dangers. It's one of the dangers of being a tzaddik, right? Which is that mamash could be such a tzaddik, but you can't. Sometimes you can lose that. And you have to realize that Hashem's even further. However high you go, Hashem's even more infinite. He's even more than that. But yet, there's also a place of synthesizing the fall, synthesizing the mistakes. That when we fall, like we feel like I'm so worthless. Like there's no way that I could be a Baal Gaiva from it.
Interesting. So here's another story. This is related to the same idea, but it brings a couple of different points out. So this story says here that one time, Chatzkel of Kuzmir was in the city of Warsaw, and he was with his son, and they were out in some public gardens, some beautiful gardens. They were taking a walk. They were taking a stroll. And he turns to his son and he says, "Do you sense anything right now?" He says, "No, I don't sense anything." So his father said, "I want you to know, it's interesting because if you want to feel Kedusha, you could feel it in this place much easier than other places. This is a public place. It's full of goyim and there weren't Jews there." He says, because sometimes in a place of Tumah, there's nowhere for the Kedusha, for the sparks of Kedusha to attach to. There's no body for them to attach to. But really, Malay Kol Aretz Kavayde, God's presence is everywhere, and there's Nitzotzes Kedusha and everything. So if you want to attach to Kedusha, sometimes it can be much easier if you're in a place where there is no Kedusha. Wow. And he says, I'll tell you a story to explain this. He says, Rabbunim from Peshischa, before he became a big Rebbe, he was actually a businessman. And he used to go to Danzig. Danzig is a Polish/German port city on the Baltic Sea. And there's a lot of business going on in port cities. That's where all the business is, the import and export. So he would go to Danzig to do business, buy and sell. And after he came back from Danzig, he was a big tzaddik, but he didn't just suddenly become a Rebbe overnight. He was already very connected to his two Rebbes, the Yehuda Kaddish of Peshischa and the Chayz of Lublin. So he would come back from Danzig. The first Shabbos he would spend in Peshischa, and the second one in Lublin. Right? If he went to Danzig, he had to do his business. He had to, get on the world and come back. Two Shabbos by the Rebbes, one by the Yehuda Kaddish and one by the Chayz. So one time after his business trip, he did Peshischa, and then he came to Lublin for Shabbos. And the Rebbe wouldn't talk to him. The Chayzer just ignored him. He didn't know. He thought, all right, maybe he was busy. He didn't notice me. So he came back again to the Beis Medrash, and again, the Rebbe totally ignored him. So Rabbunim starts thinking, what did I do? It's not for nothing. The Rebbe is ignoring me. He says, didn't feel very good. So he starts thinking, what happens? Starts doing cheshbon nefesh. Starts thinking, maybe in my trip to Danzig, I did something wrong while I was there, away from out of the Beis Medrash. He starts thinking, and Dafka had a very good Danzig this time. He did everything right, and not only that, but there was a lot of he would connect with a lot of German Jews in Danzig, and he loved hanging out with the German Jews because he would peshischa them, he would give them a dose of some good peshischa energy. And so it happened to be this time. He mamish blew some minds in Danzig, and he converted some German Jews over to his way of thinking, and he had a great trip. He couldn't understand. So he's thinking, you know what? Like it says in the Gemara, pish pesh v'loi matzah. If you search through and you can't find anything that why you're getting punished, so yitla b'bittul Torah. So he says, what does that mean? He says, all right, I definitely had bittul Torah. So he decided to sit down, and he sat down and learned for like the whole day, most of the night. He's, all right, I'm going to be attacking this. I didn't learn enough Torah. I'm going to start learning Torah. And while he was learning, he suddenly thought, you know why I didn't find anything? Pishpesh v'loi matzah, yitla bittul Torah. The reason why you didn't find anything is because you didn't learn Torah. But if you learn Torah, it'll help you find what your Avera was.
Wow.
So after learning Torah, you realized, you know what my Avera was? I felt so good about myself. I had such a good Danzig. I was such a big Baal Gaiva. Look at all the good things I did. I blew all these minds of all these German Jews. That's my issue. I think maybe that's why the Rebbe's not talking to me, because I'm such a Baal Gaiva. So he went back to the Rebbe and says, you know what, now that I chopped it, let's see what happens. He went back to the Chayza. The Chayza greeted him, big hug. And the Chayza says to him, you know, Danzig is a Makom Tumah. It's not, there's not a lot of from Jews living over there in Danzig. And the Shechinta Begalusa attaches itself to any holy Yid that comes there. So you went there and you thought, oh, I'm such a great guy. I had such a good Danzig. It's a heck of a lot easier to attach to Kedusha sometimes in a place of Tumah. So that's the story.
Wow. Wow, that's very interesting. It also puts a little bit of a spin onto, Noach was a tzaddik in his generation. Like sometimes we even see that. Sometimes you see, like, I think we say, like, when you start out the journey on getting close to Hashem, first you get a big light, but then the light fades because, like, when you haven't, like, been close to it, so, like, Gaval, suddenly, like, all the good, nitzaitzis, all the good energies begin to shine out. But then once, like, you get into it, and now you're, like, doing the avodah all the time, so it's a difference. Like, we're talking about space in these stories, different makom, but also in people. Like, if you haven't been connected, you get lit up. But then once you're lit up, like, now you have to start doing the harder birurim. Those initial sparks that we're waiting to, like, be picked out. Like, those are the big easy pieces. Now you got to get out the vacuum cleaners and start really doing the birurim, the cleaning.
Yeah, and another thing I was thinking about this story is that a lot of times here in Eretz Yisrael, it's like we feel like life is a drudgery sometimes. We don't feel lit up all the time. And I know that when I go to the States, when I leave Eretz Yisrael, it's so much easier for me to connect. I have such aliyahs. And I don't know why. It's like all of a sudden, like, why is it so much easier for me to connect in Chutz La'aretz than to connect in Eretz Yisrael? It's like, well, I guess this story explains it a little bit. Sometimes it's just much easier to connect. And I was just talking to a friend about this. He was telling me also, and he goes on business trips to the States, and he has such an aliyah. He goes out, he goes to his friends in LA, and they're just tripping on tires all the time. And it's like, maybe I should move there.
Right.
I said, look,
until you move there, and then you're. Yeah.
I said, well, right now you're a ninja because you live in Eretz Yisrael. You're, like, always fighting on a higher level of kedusha, a higher level of connection. It's hard to live in Eretz Yisrael and stay on a higher level. And in some ways it's easier, but I just think that if you live in Eretz Yisrael and you're working on yourself, we don't even realize it, but you become a spiritual master on another level. And suddenly you go to Chutz La'aretz, it's like you're a vacuum cleaner just sucking up Nitzaitz's kedusha, just connecting all over the place. It's a crazy thing.
Yeah, I think there's two points I'd like to make. One is that, first of all, in general, this is why we have, Rabbi Nachman calls it, you have to be baki bahalicha, baki and going. You have to have ratza v'shayv, ups and downs. And we also call it Ava and Yira, or Meichin the godless, or Meichin the katnas. But all of these things, they give us the ability that we can have moments of highs and lows, and by going high, we get an uplifting thing, but then we enter back into the low places, and we can, like, scoop it up a lot of nitzaitis, but then we have to work our way back to the high place, and then come back to the low place. This balance between the two avodas help us to slowly do the whole work. I mean, like, I'll give you an example. Like, if somebody wants to work on lashon hara and rechilos and sinas chinam and all these things, so you can either work it in the low place or in the high place. In the low place, you have to go through each prat and you have to fix each prat by prat. The problem is that there's too many pratim to be able to do it all. Then you have a high place. In the high place, you go to the place where you suddenly inflamed and you work on Avas Yisrael, and suddenly you're not saying Lashon Hara, you're not saying Rechilas, you're not having Sinas Chinam, you're not having a Ra'ayin, you're not doing all these things because you're parsha you love everybody. The problem is that when you're in that high place, maybe you haven't fixed every prat that needs to be fixed. Maybe there are some pratim that you really need to work on. So when you go to the high place, it kind of cleans it up, it whitewashes everything. Then when you come back down, you see, what are the points that I need to really clean? And then you scrub those little points. Then you go back to the high place where it just like washes everything again. And this yin and yang, this journey of aliyas and yeridas can really, by working with both of them, can really help us to become, to grow in levels that we wouldn't be able to if we were just stuck in one avodah, so to speak.
Gotta have those uppers and the downers.
Yeah, the second point I mentioned, there was a second point was I think also that sometimes leaving your own place, from your own habits, your own daily thoughts. So when you go, whether you're going on a business trip or sometimes, if you're going from New York to Israel or Israel to New York, but you're going on a trip, when you're leaving your zone, you're opened up to new thoughts and new possibilities. And for somebody whose mind is connected to Hashem, so you're open to being mala nitzaitis and having thoughts that you maybe haven't always had. And so you're there, and for example, you go to New York, and suddenly the regular drudgery of your day, of your life, that you have to like do X, Y, and Z, suddenly it's flipped, it's open, and so you're able to infuse it with freshness. And so that's really anybody when you're leaving your zone and freshen things up. It's like I guess that's an avoid of a vacation, of getting out a little bit.
Right. Okay, cool. That was fun. Thanks.
Yeah. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. I just, one last thing. It's important to remember, and in Meshivas Nefesh, you just get it again and again over the head. We're never disconnected from Hashem. It's so important to remember that no matter what we've done, Hashem is always there. We can always connect to Him. So as long as we don't say like, I can't. No, you could. So we had just remember we got to be like that guy in the first story, that even though maybe he wasn't the great guy, and maybe some of the stories about him were true, and maybe some of the stories I tell myself about myself are also true, those negative stories. But it shouldn't stop us from connecting to Hashem and from recognizing that Hashem is always with us and always open to hear us, no matter when. You do an Avera, okay, boom, forget about it. Go daven now. It's all right. There should be nothing stopping us. We always have an open channel to Hashem as whenever we want it. So never forget that.
Amen. L'chaim.